Coming up on this edition of the Demon Stories, things took a turn for the absolute chaotic. He told me, "In 15 years of working in this village, I have never witnessed anything remotely like this. We were there praying for the sick, and suddenly, crippled individuals were standing up and walking. The blind were regaining their sight. Genuine miracles were unfolding right before our eyes. I remember calling my wife and telling her, 'I honestly can't believe half of the things I am witnessing here.' Then, the pastor turned to me and said, 'I have a request, but you are free to say no. There is a specific family living at the peak of the mountain.' He warned me that often missionaries would go up there and come back down disturbed by dark experiences. As we hiked up that mountain, the air felt thick, almost like static electricity buzzing around us. Of course, skeptical thoughts cross your mind, like, did they drug the tea? But then the woman looked at me and explained, 'The reason I allowed you into my home is because when we embraced, the only spirit I could sense was the one you brought with you.' She continued, 'All the other spirits that usually work with us, they fled.' Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Demon Stories, the show where I sit down with everyday people who have extraordinary tales to tell. Today, my guest is Ken Arrington. And I am not using hyperbole when I say he possesses one of the most mind-bending life stories I have ever encountered. His journey went viral on TikTok a few months back. But today we are going to unpack the entire narrative in a much deeper, detailed format. I will make sure to drop his social links in the description box below so you can follow his work after this episode. He is a truly fascinating individual and a genuinely good man, so it was a privilege for me to conduct this interview. With all the introductions out of the way, let's dive straight into Ken's story. It started when my wife and I were residing in New Orleans. At that time, I was managing a museum dedicated to the paranormal. That was essentially my entire existence: the paranormal, the occult, witchcraft, and everything in between. We had been married for about a year when we discovered she was pregnant. Consequently, we decided to move back to our home state of North Carolina to prepare for the birth of our first child. Everything was going perfectly with the pregnancy. It was wonderful. However, just a few days after Thanksgiving, during the 7th month of gestation, the baby suddenly ceased moving. We rushed to the hospital for an emergency C-section. It turned out there had been trauma to the umbilical cord, just a complete freak accident, and tragically, we lost our son when he was only 5 days old. Yet, in the midst of that heartbreaking loss, a specific presence filled the hospital room. It was overwhelmingly comforting. While logically we should have been drowning in horrible anguish, and in many ways, we were suffering in that specific moment, there was a profound peace that I had never truly encountered before. You have to understand, I had been involved in some very intense situations and had experienced plenty of strange phenomena. But I had never felt a peace that was calm and settling like this. Following this, my wife began a spiritual search. She had started a new job and made friends who attended a local church. I was completely fine with that. She began attending services, and I didn't object. I grew up with a religious background and believed in a God, though not necessarily the biblical Yahweh. Having spent my life exploring various religions, I believed more in a universal force type of concept. Fast forward a few months, and I started attending the church with her. I did this primarily because I love my wife and will always support her, even though the church environment made me quite uncomfortable at the time. However, attending those services eventually led to a powerful, face-to-face encounter with Jesus a couple of months later. I won't get bogged down in the minute details of that event because it's not the main focus of this specific conversation. But suffice it to say, I had a visceral, undeniable meeting with Jesus. Suddenly, I faced a serious conundrum. I asked myself, okay, what do I do now? I had a lifetime of experience with the occult and other entities, but now I had proof that Jesus is real. It changes everything when you simply know. Ken, you see, faith is a massive component of this journey, trust me. I understand that. However, there is a distinct difference between believing in something abstractly and possessing a physical, undeniable knowledge of it. When doubt is completely removed from the equation, you can't just carry on as you were. You are compelled to make a decision. Consequently, my wife and I didn't just dip our toes in the water. We cannonballed into the deep end. Christianity wasn't just a casual Sunday morning ritual for us. It abruptly became our entire existence. Everything changed. Because of our background in the occult and the sudden, radical 180-degree turn we took, we actually unnerved a lot of long-time Christians. We were leading a life of such intensity that it confused people within the institutional church. They didn't quite know how to handle our passion. Frankly, it scared some of them. Fortunately, we had an incredible pastor who became a close friend and mentor. Instead of being intimidated by our zeal, he looked at us and said, "Wow, the Lord truly has a unique purpose for these two." This led to us getting invited to a conference where a man named Georgian Banov was speaking. If you haven't heard of him, he is a Romanian minister, often referred to as the Apostle of Joy. He is perpetually happy and possesses a very hyper-energetic personality. During the service, he made an altar call, shouting in his thick accent for anyone who felt the pull to become a missionary to come to the front. My wife didn't hesitate. She parted through that crowd like Moses through the Red Sea. Missionary work was a serious desire of her heart. I, on the other hand, watched her go and thought, oh no, I had absolutely zero desire to be a missionary. Growing up in the church, I had heard all the horror stories, the poverty, the constant begging for money. I wanted no part of that lifestyle. But since she was going up there, I reluctantly followed her. Georgian came down the line, praying for people. When he reached me, he placed his hand on my head. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the floor sometime later, laughing uncontrollably. It was the most bizarre experience. Host, wait, you just woke up? Yeah, it was wild. You have to understand, I grew up in a Pentecostal household. I had watched people fake falling out in the spirit my whole life, getting tapped on the forehead and falling over just for show. I always believed it was fake, just mass hypnosis or collective hysteria. But this was real. I was out cold. When I came to, my sides actually ached, because apparently I had been lying on the floor, giggling for nearly 20 or 30 minutes. I stood up, dusting myself off, and thought, okay, well, maybe this mission work isn't so bad after all. That experience flipped a switch. Within 2 months, we were on the ground in India. It happened so fast. We weren't in the tourist areas. We were deep in the slums, witnessing scenes that felt like they were ripped from a movie script. We saw intense poverty, but we also saw crazy miracles as we prayed for people. I remember thinking, all right, Lord, this is getting intense. We eventually returned to India a second time, and by that point, my wife and I decided, this is it. This is our life now. We wanted to go to the hardest places on earth. We began trying to figure out the logistics of moving abroad permanently, perhaps to India. However, every plan we made fell through. Nothing was sequencing correctly. The doors just weren't opening. Then, out of the blue, I received an invitation to go to Cuba. I immediately agreed because I've always had an affinity for the Caribbean nations. So, the plan was set for Cuba. The timing was intense. Years after losing our first son, we had a daughter, and then we had just welcomed another baby boy. My son was only 6 weeks old when I boarded that plane to Cuba. We landed, and almost instantly, the situation spiraled into something wild. We were located in the southern region of Cuba. I want to be vague about the specific coordinates for safety reasons, but it was far removed from the capital. You know, when people imagine Cuba, they almost exclusively picture Havana. It's a similar phenomenon to tourists visiting New York City and claiming they have seen America. No, You have seen New York. The rest of the country is a different animal entirely. The same logic applies to Cuba. We met up with our local contact and drove out to a small, remote village nestled in the shadow of a mountain range. We spent some time just hanging out and acclimating. Even though it was February, the heat was absolutely stifling. Eventually, the local pastor invited us to see his church. Now, you have to understand that church, in this context, doesn't mean a cathedral with stained glass. It was essentially a large, open-air concrete slab. The political reality there is harsh. If a church building becomes too prominent or the congregation gets too large, the government is liable to intervene, seize the property, and repurpose it for their own use, forcing the believers to start from scratch. So, keeping things modest is a survival strategy. The pastor was incredibly proud of what he had built, and we were happy to walk over and see it. On the way there, we passed a school. Adjacent to it, on a concrete courtyard, there was a woman sweeping the floor. She was dressed in all black, looking very much like a housekeeper or custodian. As we walked past her, I was suddenly hit with a profound spiritual weight. I felt the Lord speaking to me clearly, telling me that he wanted this specific woman to know how deeply he loved her. There was a fence separating us from her, so I stopped and turned to the pastor. I said, "Pastor, I need a favor. Can you translate for me? I feel like I have a message from the Lord for this woman." He agreed, saying, "Yeah, sure." I looked him in the eye and emphasized, "I need you to translate exactly what I say, word for word." I began to speak. It was like a tap opened up. I started knowing specific details about her life that I couldn't possibly have known. I told her that God sees her heart of sacrifice, that he honors the work she does to provide, and that he simply wants to overwhelm her with his love. I was pouring out all these affirmations. However, I have a rudimentary understanding of Spanish enough to pick up on pacing and tone, and I realized he wasn't translating my words accurately. He was hesitating, pausing, and changing the phrasing. We had a team member with us who was fluent in Spanish, and she leaned over to me and whispered, "He is not saying what you are saying." The problem wasn't a language barrier. It was a theological barrier. In his mind, what I was doing was a violation of how Jesus should relate to sinners. You see, this woman was a practitioner of Santeria. In this part of Cuba, Santeria is a dominant force. It is a syncretic religion that blends Roman Catholicism with Yoruba magic from Africa. Practitioners might appear to be praying to Christian saints, but they are actually worshipping orishas, which are essentially spiritual forces or entities. To the locals, she was effectively a witch. The pastor, operating from a more legalistic or Old Testament framework, could not reconcile the idea of God pouring out such tender love and validation upon a woman involved in the occult. He didn't want to tell her what I was saying because it conflicted with his belief system. So, I had to stop him. I looked at him and said, "Pastor, I need you to." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I know this challenges you, and I know it is difficult, but I need you to translate it verbatim." He relented, saying, "Okay." And this time, he actually did it. The moment those words left his mouth, the moment the true message hit her ears, her entire countenance shifted. At first, she stiffened up, but not in a defensive or angry way. It was the physical reaction of a realization hitting her like a freight train. She immediately began to weep. I kept pressing in, telling her, "Jesus has been watching over you. He loves you. You were created specifically for a relationship with him." And she was just coming undone. It was a beautiful wrecking. She was completely overwhelmed by this wave of affection. Because of the fence separating us, we moved inside the church structure. Barely 2 minutes later, she came rushing around the corner. She was clutching a handful of small idols. In the Santeria faith, there is a specific type of jewelry known as a puke shell necklace, which is worn for spiritual protection. She was frantically tearing these things off her body, items that symbolized the protection of her gods, and she was shoving them into my hands. It only took a few sentences of genuine love, and she was willing to discard everything she had previously relied on. Host, that is incredible. It really highlights something important. You see people arguing about theology on TikTok or social media all the time, and that's why I rarely engage in those debates. No human being has ever been argued into the kingdom of heaven. Not a single one. You might convince someone intellectually that a God exists, but the Lord is chasing a relationship, not a debate victory. So, she hands over these idols, and the pastor is standing there with his jaw on the floor. He turned to me and whispered, "In 15 years of ministry in this village, I have never witnessed anything like this." From that moment on, the pastor trusted me completely. For the remainder of the trip, he translated exactly what I said without hesitation. After the woman surrendered her idols, she essentially became our shadow, following us everywhere. She began spreading the word to other women in the village. Suddenly, the pastor's phone started blowing up with messages. People were texting, "Send the long-haired, curly white boy to our house." We would arrive at these homes belonging to practicing witches, and find that they had already piled up their ritualistic items and idols outside their doors. They would invite us in and simply say, "Tell us about this Jesus." Host, had they never heard that version of Jesus before? They knew of him, but they had never experienced him. To them, Christianity was a philosophy or an idea, while their witchcraft felt real and tangible. But when we showed up, we brought a reality that was more powerful than their magic. It shook their worldview to its core. Fast forward about 3 days. Our mission team consisted of me and 3 wonderful ladies in their 60s. We showed up to the church, and suddenly, 350 people from this tiny village were trying to cram themselves into this small concrete space. Technically, as an American, I wasn't even legally allowed to speak from the pulpit. That's a major government restriction. But the pastor looked at me and said, "I need you to speak anyway." So I got up and simply spoke about the love of Jesus. I don't know how to explain it other than to say a specific frequency or atmosphere was released in that moment. I have been to India numerous times. I've done mission work all over the US. I've seen things happen, but this was different. I am a very rational person if you follow my content. You know I value history, logic, and verification. But we were praying for people, and the impossible was happening. Crippled individuals were standing up and walking. People who were blind were regaining their sight. Genuine, undeniable miracles were breaking out. Naturally, word of this started spreading like wildfire to neighboring villages. We began traveling to these other areas, but then we received a warning. The news had traveled too far. We were told that the secret police were now looking for us, and they were looking for me specifically. Since we didn't have access to automobiles, we were traversing the entire region on foot. The pastor gave us a very specific warning. If you see a moped with 2 men riding on it, look the other way immediately. I remember thinking to myself, okay, but literally every moped I see here has 2 people on it. It was nerve-wracking, but at the same time, there was an exhilarating sense of adventure watching the Lord move. There was one specific moment where things got tight. We were hiking from one village to another. Now, as Americans on tourist visas, we were legally restricted to specific zones. By traveling to these remote areas to pray for people, we were essentially violating the terms of our stay. We were not being good tourists. We were walking back along a small mountain road when a police vehicle suddenly rounded the corner. The pastor, sensing the danger immediately, whispered to us, "No matter what happens, keep your eyes fixed forward. Do not look back. Just keep walking." I could hear the vehicle slowing down as it approached us. It was obvious we were the targets. My teammate and I were the only white people for miles, so we stood out like sore thumbs. I felt this sinking feeling in my gut, thinking, This is it. They finally tracked us down. They have a reason to arrest us. And then I am not kidding, right at that critical second, a herd of about 150 goats emerged from the brush. They walked right into the middle of the road and just stopped dead. The police car was completely cut off. They couldn't navigate around the animals. We could hear them honking the horn and shouting. But the goats wouldn't budge. This wasn't a highway. It was a narrow mountain pass, and it was now effectively barricaded by livestock. Our contact seized the opportunity and hissed, "Walk faster! I know a shortcut." We ducked into the woods and vanished down a hidden path. It was just one of many bizarre, almost cinematic moments. After that, a shift occurred in my mind. I stopped worrying. I realized, okay, if the Lord is going to use a herd of goats to block the police, He is obviously protecting us. That realization made me significantly bolder. We returned to the village, and for the next few days, we witnessed miracles that my rational mind still struggles to process. I often look back and ask, did that actually happen? One case involved a man who had been a high-ranking officer in the Cuban military before retiring. He had suffered severe brain damage which resulted in nerve paralysis. He hadn't been able to open his hands for years. They were locked in tight fists. He had heard about what was happening in the village and requested that I come to his home. I looked at his hands, gnarled and frozen, and we began talking to him about the love of Jesus and his desire to heal. But internally, I was fighting a battle. A voice in my head was saying, "Don't say this. Don't get this guy's hopes up. What if nothing happens?" It's that fear of disappointment. But I decided to push past the doubt. I thought, you know what? I'm going for it. I told him, "I feel like the Lord wants to open your hands right now." His wife was translating, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She had been caring for this man for over 2 decades. She knew the reality of his condition. We started to pray, and suddenly, his fingers began to uncurl. He started rotating his wrists, moving his hands back and forth freely. The reaction was instantaneous chaos. He started screaming in shock. His wife began screaming and actually ran out of the house and down the street in pure joy. We were just standing there thinking, what on earth is going on? It was just Jesus. I really tried to model our approach after what I saw in the Bible. If you study the Gospels, Jesus never healed anyone the same way twice. We often get bogged down in our Western mindset, creating theological excuses like, oh, that person didn't get healed because they have unforgiveness in their heart, or they have a secret sin. I'm telling you right now, that is garbage. It is absolute nonsense. You cannot find that in the Gospels. Jesus never said, I would heal you, but you need to forgive your neighbor first. Jesus simply said, by your faith, you are healed. He didn't offer a list of preconditions. The reality of what was happening was so overwhelming that I remember calling my wife on the phone, completely flabbergasted. I told her, I honestly cannot believe half of the things I am seeing right now. Host, even though you were physically there witnessing it, you were struggling to process it? Absolutely. My brain was short-circuiting. It wrecked me, primarily because I knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't me doing it. Look, I want to be honest. I have prayed for plenty of people in the past where absolutely nothing happened. Nothing. But here I was, watching tumors melt away and blind eyes open, and I knew, okay, the Lord is up to something massive here. He is setting the stage. We later found out a chilling detail. The government had actually tapped our phones. They were listening to our calls and keeping tabs on our movements the entire time. Towards the end of the trip, either the last day or the day prior, the pastor approached me with a very serious demeanor. He said, look, I want to ask you something, but I want you to know you have the freedom to say no. He then proceeded to tell me about a specific family living at the very peak of the mountain. Throughout the week, while we were ministering to people involved in Santerian, I had heard whispers about the family at the top. The pastor explained that this lineage had occupied that summit for as long as anyone could remember. In their belief system, rooted in Santerian magic and the worship of orishas, geography matters. Being at the highest elevation signifies dominion. Essentially, everything their eyes could see from that mountaintop was considered under their spiritual jurisdiction. They were the only ones living up there, maintaining spiritual control over the valley. The pastor warned me. For years, missionaries and mission teams have gone up there looking for a spiritual showdown. They wanted a confrontation, like Elijah calling down fire from heaven. They would go up there rebuking the witches, shouting at them, trying to prove their God was stronger. But here is the thing. If you go to someone's property line and start screaming at them, they are going to scream back. And that is exactly what happened. It became a shouting match. However, the consequences were severe. Often, those missionaries would come back down the mountain and face terrible retaliation. We are talking about financial ruin, sudden illnesses affecting their children, and even rumors of people dying shortly after these encounters. Because of this, the villagers lived in a state of high alert regarding this family. It wasn't just fear. It was a deep, terrified respect. The general rule was, don't mess with them, or something bad will happen to you. They wielded genuine power. The pastor looked at me and said, after everything I have witnessed this week, the miracles, the healings, would you be willing to go up there with me? Let's go meet them. I didn't hesitate. I said, yes, let's do it. I was riding a spiritual high that I hadn't felt in years. When you spend a week watching the blind recover their sight, seeing inoperable nerve damage repaired in seconds, and even watching a herd of goats divinely intervene to block the police, your confidence is at a different level. So, we made the plan over dinner that night. He told me, we leave tomorrow morning. It's an all-day trek up the mountain. I made one condition clear to him. I said, I am not going up there to fight anyone. That is not my goal. I want to go up there to see these people meet Jesus. I wanted to approach them with respect, not aggression. So the morning of the trek arrived. I was in prayer, asking the Father, okay, Papa, what is the game plan for today? I specifically asked, Lord, crack the door open. Grant me access to the hearts of these people so I can reach them. Suddenly, I felt what I can only describe as a spiritual backhand across the face. It was a sharp, jarring correction from the Holy Spirit. The Lord spoke to me with absolute clarity. I will not give you access to their hearts. I was stunned into silence. Then he finished the sentence. I will not give you access unless you are willing to love them exactly the way I do. That statement floored me. I had never truly considered that perspective before. You have to understand, after a week of witnessing high-power miracles, walking into homes, seeing idols cast aside, and watching sickness vanish, my ego had started to inflate. I had begun to view these people not as human beings, but as targets. I wanted to save the witches as another trophy for the mission trip. The Lord called me out on it immediately. He essentially told me that trying to convert them without genuinely loving them is nothing more than cold-blooded manipulation. He said, I don't want your agenda. I just want you to go up there and love them, regardless of the cost. I humbled myself and said, okay, Lord, that is what we will do. Then, God gave me a glimpse of reality from their perspective. For generations, their only interaction with Christianity had been hostile. To them, Christians were the people who stood at the edge of their property line, screaming insults, rebuking them, and condemning them to hell. But here is the nuance we often miss. They didn't view themselves as villains. In their own narrative, they weren't evil people. They believed they were public servants. They were using the spiritual tools they understood to help their community, healing the sick, predicting the future, and providing protection. They were doing the best they could with the knowledge they possessed. This realization hit home for me because, back in my mid-20s, before I found Christ, I actually owned and operated an occult bookstore. I can tell you from first-hand experience that some of the kindest, most welcoming people I ever met were witches and practitioners of the occult. Conversely, some of the most vicious, hateful individuals I have ever encountered, both then and now, claim to follow Jesus. If you look at the comments on my social media today, the vitriol doesn't come from atheists, pagans, or witches. The meanest, nastiest attacks always come from the religious crowd. Host, why do you think that is? It boils down to a superiority complex. We are so desperate to be right that we are willing to destroy other human beings to prove our theological points. We completely miss the heart of the gospel. We forget to ask the crucial question: what was it about Jesus that made the sinful and the immoral want to be near him? Why did prostitutes and corrupt tax collectors, the outcasts of society, feel safe enough to pour expensive perfume on his feet and dry them with their hair? They didn't do that for the religious leaders. They felt safe doing that with Jesus because he didn't lead with condemnation. If people want to know why the modern church is dying, the answer is brutally simple. We don't have the love of Jesus. End of story. Host, that is a profound distinction. Many people operate under the assumption that Jesus and the church are synonymous, that Christianity is defined by the building or the institution. But you are suggesting the opposite, that the institutional structure is one entity, while the person of God is something entirely different. Sometimes they align, but not always. You are absolutely correct, 100%. The Apostle Paul actually addressed this when he said, "I do not come to you with wise words or superior eloquence, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power." And crucially, that power is motivated and fueled entirely by love. I have a phrase I often use. Christians are obsessed with having their Elijah moment. They want the dramatic showdown on Mount Carmel, calling down fire from heaven to consume the non-believers. But we aren't called to have an Elijah moment. We are called to have a Jesus moment. We love because he first loved us. That was the specific mindset I adopted as we began our ascent up that hill. I had to be very clear with myself. This is not about proving my God is superior to their gods. It is not about winning a theological debate. Honestly, my goal wasn't even to save them in the traditional sense. Host, really? No. My directive wasn't to convert them. My directive was to go up there and love them exactly as Jesus would. That was the only command I had to follow. So, we climbed the mountain, and I was feeling incredible, just floating on cloud 9. The pastor was right beside me, fully committed, saying, "Let's do this." We reached the compound, and I knocked on the door. Now, I have to mention the woman from our team who was with us. Before this week, she had led a very sheltered life and had never encountered anything remotely like this. She was terrified. In her mind, she was expecting a scene from a horror movie. When the door swung open, I actually heard her gasp because the reality was so mundane. The woman standing there wasn't wearing dark, flowy robes dripping with sacrificial blood. She wasn't some terrifying high priestess of darkness. She was wearing a simple tank top and a pair of blue jeans. She looked like any ordinary mom you would bump into at Walmart or Target. I knew to expect this because of my past, but for my team, it was a shock to realize, oh, they are just normal people. The woman looked at us and asked in Spanish, "Can I help you?" The pastor stepped in and introduced me. By this point, his hesitation was completely gone. His entire theological framework had been rocked by the miracles he'd seen, so he translated my words verbatim. I said, "Hello, my name is Ken. Thank you for meeting me. I just wanted to come here and bless your house." I watched her reaction closely. Her eyes fluttered, and her head pulled back slightly in genuine surprise. She had clearly never heard words of blessing coming from a Christian before. Usually, it was condemnation. She gave me a look of deep curiosity, almost saying, "Okay, let's see where this goes." She invited us closer. Now, In this specific culture, the customary greeting for a guest, even a stranger, is a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I asked, "May I give you a hug?" Our team member hugged her first, and then I stepped in. Let me tell you, when I embraced that woman, it felt like I had been electrocuted. It was one of the most powerful, visceral hugs I have ever experienced. It wasn't just physical pressure. It felt like I had known her for a lifetime. I held her tight, and I could physically feel the spiritual atmosphere shifting. There was a sensation like static electricity buzzing between us. When we pulled apart, tears were streaming down her face. She looked at me and whispered, "Yes, please, come inside my home." We walked in, and there was her husband sitting across the room. To give you a visual, the main room was a large, open space designed for their work. This was where they brought villagers to perform rituals, offer prayers, and conduct healings. The walls were lined with the tools of their trade. There were animal skulls, jars filled with various herbs and roots, and different syncretic religious artifacts. It honestly looked like a set design for a movie about the occult. The husband stood up immediately, looking completely bewildered. He sees the local preacher standing there with this long-haired white guy in his living room, and his face just screamed, "What on earth is going on here?" Ken, the husband, stood up abruptly. He was covered in a chalky white dust because we had effectively interrupted a divination ceremony. He had been in the middle of casting shells, shaking them, and throwing them down to interpret the patterns, which is how they discern the will of the orishas, or spirits. So, he is standing there, mid-ritual, coated in this powder. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up to him, bypassed any awkwardness, and firmly grabbed his hand. I looked him right in the eye and said, "I am so incredibly honored to be in your home. Thank you for having us. I simply wanted to come here and speak a blessing over your house." He was completely stunned. He didn't know how to react. He just glanced around the room, confused. His wife gave him a subtle nod, signaling that it was okay. You have to understand, the only interaction they had ever had with people who looked like me, foreign missionaries, was pure hatred and condemnation. And this wasn't a city or a tourist town. This was a remote village steeped in generations of Santerian priesthood. They decided to invite us further into the home for tea. Now, I have to be real with you for a second. The thought absolutely crossed my mind. What if they spiked the tea? What if this is poisoned? You hear stories about people getting dosed in these situations, but I quickly dismissed the fear. I decided, you know what? I am all in. If I go down, I go down. So, I drank the tea. We sat there for hours, 4, maybe 5 hours, just talking. I opened up and shared my entire backstory, talking about my previous involvement in the occult and the things I used to practice. They were captivated, leaning in and drinking in every word. By the end of the conversation, I could tell they were waiting for the pitch. They knew enough about missionaries to expect that moment where I would pivot and try to force a conversion. But I didn't do it. That wasn't why I was there. Finally, the woman couldn't take it anymore. She piped up and asked, "How do I get the spirit that you carry with you?" I asked her to clarify, and she said, "The reason I invited you into my home is because when you hugged me, the only spirit I could feel was the one you brought. All the other spirits that we work with, they left. And since you have been sitting here, none of the spirits we usually work with have been able to re-enter this house." Her husband was sitting there, nodding in agreement. That is when the gravity of the situation hit me. I realized, oh wow, something massive is happening here. I hadn't walked in there binding demons or shouting prayers. I hadn't done any spiritual warfare theatrics. I just went in with the love of Jesus to hear their story. And the atmosphere shifted on its own. I looked at her and said, "Well, there is a catch. If you want what I have, those other entities you work with cannot stay in the same space. They are incompatible." She immediately became distressed. She started wringing her hands anxiously. repeating, "It's impossible. It's impossible." This is the part that Westerners often fail to grasp. In cultures that worship familial gods or ancestral spirits, these idols aren't just statues or trinkets. They represent the family's entire history. When Christian deliverance ministries talk about familiar spirits, they are often talking about entities passed down through bloodlines. For these people, turning in their idols is equivalent to erasing their family tree. While we had been in Cuba, we watched people surrendering these items, and I realized they were literally handing over their inheritance to receive a new spiritual inheritance. It was a sacrifice of their identity. So, when she said it's impossible, she was thinking about the fact that her family had held that mountain for generations. She felt she would lose everything. I reassured her, "Look, I didn't come here to convert you. I came to bless you. If you want the spirit that is with me to stay, that is wonderful. But if not, it doesn't change the fact that I think you are amazing, and I love and honor you." Suddenly, their daughter stood up. She was about 12 years old. She looked at us and said firmly, "I want it." Her mother looked at her and said, "Absolutely, you can." So, we gathered around this 12-year-old girl and prayed. We simply asked Jesus to reveal himself to her in ways that were beyond comprehension. We left that house with massive, genuine hugs. They were pleading with us, saying, "Thank you so much. Please, you have to come back. Next time you are in the country, you must stay here with us." It was an incredible departure. As we hiked back down the hill, the pastor was shaking his head in disbelief. He kept repeating, "In 15 years, I have never seen a reaction like that. I had no idea that was even possible." But here is where the story takes a turn. When I tried to leave Cuba, things got intense. I was detained at the airport. The authorities gave me a really hard time. They tore through my luggage and searched my clothes. I was surrounded by guards holding AK-47 seconds, and the atmosphere was thick with intimidation. Eventually, after a lot of tension, they let me go, and I made it onto the plane. However, a short time later, we received news that validated everything. That family, the one at the top of the mountain, did indeed end up surrendering everything to Jesus. Host. Wow. What was the catalyst? It was the change they saw in their daughter. She had suffered from terrible recurring nightmares and various physical ailments. After we prayed, the nightmares stopped completely, and her physical issues vanished. She was totally healed. That tangible proof was undeniable for them. Today, that couple serves as missionaries. They have a unique ministry where they travel through the valleys and mountains to speak with other priests and priestesses of Santeria. They are doing exactly what we did. They don't go to force a conversion. They go to express a level of love that these practitioners have never comprehended before. The mother, the woman the entire village used to be terrified of, now runs the children's ministry for something like 6 different churches. Every day, she is in a different location, teaching children about Jesus. She pours out the love she received. The local pastor told me, "Ken, I have a different problem now. I have to figure out how to disciple hundreds and hundreds of new believers, and it all started because the Lord gave me a specific instruction. I don't want you to convert them. I want you to love them." If you actually study the scriptures, Jesus never commanded us to go and convert nations. He said, "Go and disciple nations." And how did he disciple his own followers? He did it through relationship and love. Even then, his disciples missed the mark constantly. Look at James and John. They had been with Jesus day and night for 3 years. They knew how he liked his eggs in the morning. They had seen the human side of him. They saw him sleep. They saw him relieve himself off the side of the boat. They knew him intimately. Yet, despite seeing him heal the sick and preach mercy, they still wanted to call down fire to destroy a village, just like Elijah. Jesus had to rebuke them because, even after 3 years, They didn't know what spirit they were of. That is a massive warning sign for us today. We often want to get into theological measuring contests to prove we are right and everyone else is wrong. That is garbage. Jesus doesn't care about your need to be right. When the Pharisee tried to trap Jesus by asking, "What is the greatest commandment?" he was expecting a legalistic answer from the 10 Commandments. Instead, Jesus hit him out of left field with a reference to Deuteronomy. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he immediately followed it with, love your neighbor as yourself. The Pharisee's immediate defensive reaction was to ask, well, who is my neighbor? That is exactly what religion does. It tries to place qualifications on who is worthy of our love. We ask, do Muslims deserve Jesus' love? Do LGBTQ individuals deserve Jesus' love? We make lists of people we want to exclude, but the answer is always yes. Everyone is deserving of Jesus' love. People hate hearing that because it offends their sense of superiority, but it is the truth. Host, that is a powerful place to end. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss future interviews. If you found value in Ken's story, please share this episode with a friend. It really helps us grow the channel, and hopefully, it will help them too. If you have your own incredible story and want to be on the show, head over to almostfalse.net and submit it there. We would love to hear from you. With that being said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay blessed.